Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Buenas. Hafade Toru Samjo. This confirmation hearing by the Committee on Public Safety, Border Safety, Military and Veterans Affairs, Marriage Council, Infrastructure, and Public Transit is hereby called to order. For the record and in accordance with Section 8107 of Chapter 8.5 GCA, the first public hearing notice was sent out on Wednesday, April 10, 2019, adhering to the 5 working days notice, and the second public hearing adhering to the 48 hours notice was sent on Friday, April 12, 2019. In addition, this public hearing was also given notice to the Guam Legislature's website. The time now is 8:08. 8:08. 8:08. Just a couple of administrative announcements here. Those that are going to testify in regards to this particular bill, you can sign in. And if you have a written testimony and if you want to present it now, or you can send it to my address, and I'll give you my address later on. On the agenda this evening is the public hearing on the proposed rules and regulations related to permit games of chance at the Guam Island Fair and Liberation Day Carnival pursuant to Public Law 35-4, reference messages and communication document number 35GL-19-0361. Do we have anybody that's going to testify? Only Angel and the president? Está now, no? Mali Kambi. Okay, we're going to start on the left and down to on my left and down to my right. So go ahead. Go ahead, my favorite.
Buenas and half a day, kind senators. My name is Jackie Ariola Marati, and I appear before you as a private citizen to talk about these proposed rules and regulations that have been set up and drafted, still in draft form. Given the time that was spent to discuss and debate this legislation and the time to draft the 3 sets of rules, I'm certain that our wartime survivors never considered having casinos to commemorate their liberation. And while our island was being bombed, they did not think about the great carnival or parade. They simply wanted the war ended. And I trust that we'll spend a considerable amount of time to carefully review these rules. And I thank you for providing us a copy, most of which, by the way, half of them are blank worksheets that are going to be used. When we're looking at rules and regulations for these proposed games of chance, gambling, I think it's really important to determine and to identify who we're trying to protect. The rules and regulations are not intended to protect the mayors. They're not intended to protect the legislators, and they're certainly not intended to protect the vendors. They should be protecting the community. And so with this, the rules should be intended not only to protect the community, but also to prevent them from enduring any harm or risk. So, senators, I have 18 proposed changes with regard to these rules. And many of them are intended to provide clarity, they're intended to provide accountability, and they're intended to provide a strong sense of responsibility to the community. So, let's start with section 1.1, games of chance. Please provide the legal definitions of games A through I. Each game is simple. It's just a single word. All of these should have legal definitions of what that gambling game is. Number 2, games requiring skill. Please quantify the merchandise prices awarded and assign if there are any retail values to those limits. Number 3, house of cards. Please specify that the area shall be included within the confines of the Liberation Day Carnival. And please delete the term, but not limited to. Number 4, under security protocol, please specify the age. It says no minors will be allowed to partake. I think it's very important to delete the specific age beyond which individuals cannot enter the casino. Also, please specify the age requirement identification. What kind of identification is being used in terms of whether to allow these individuals into the casino?
Sorry, Jackie, sorry. You're just going too fast for us
Oh.
because it's not, I mean, we have to catch up to the order. I'm sorry, could you just
Would
pause
you like-
between sections? That's all, if you don't mind.
I'm sorry?
Which section are you on now?
I'm on section 2.5,
Okay.
security protocol. And I'll thank you. So I think it's important to specify the age. It says minors, but I think you should specify the age. Yes.
The question you asked, ma'am, is on page 4 of 5.1, participation restriction of minimum age. Would that suffice?
Every single section has different.
Okay, I wanted to ask you that question,
yeah.
okay? Because we can always say, or the presenters of this rule could have made it very simple and say, refer to 5.1. And that's why I thought I'd ask that question.
It says minors and other ages throughout the rules, I think for consistency.
Yes,
I think,
I agree
Name
with you.
it.
I agree with you.
Okay.
Totally, even from 1.1 on
great.
so far.
Yes. Okay, so again, on security protocol, there is no specification of what kind of identification is allowable. Do you want a driver's license? Do you want a passport? Are foreign forms of identification going to be allowed to allow people to go in? I think that should be very clear, because I suspect there's no discrimination in terms of who can go into these casinos. You can have tourists, you can have foreigners, you can have workers, you can have, anyone in there. So I think it's very important to specify what kind of identification you should use. Under section 2.6, the maintenance plan, it indicates a cleaning deposit. I think you should identify the dollar amount that you need in that cleaning deposit and how that's determined. 3, licensing. Under 3.1, general provisions, I suggest that you include police and sex offender clearances for those over 18 to be primarily responsible for the conduct of games of chance. Number 7, section 5.2, member in charge of conduct of games. Please assure that more than one bona fide active member can be in charge of these games. Number 8, section 5.3, the package shall be reviewed, accepted, and certified by the Mayor's Council of Guam. Number 9, section 5.4, operation for the times. Please be specific and indicate a start and end time. Number 10, Section 5.5, Operations Location. Please define what the official grounds are. And I know I'm getting into a lot of detail, but it was this lack of detail that resulted 2 years ago in having a casino at Tidzin that was going on year-round, 24 hours a day, with very little to account for. Number 11, under Section 5.7, Conduct of Traditional Games. Suggested delete 5.7.1 bingo and replace with 5.7.1. No licensee shall permit the use of electronic gambling devices on the games of chance and the house of cards premises. This specifically includes electronic bingo and electronic slot machines. Then what you're doing is you're pushing down the other two items so that you replace 1 with 2 and 2 with 3 under operation. Number 12, Section 5.8.2. Please define what official chips means, who issues the chips, and whatever illegal copying shall be cause for the removal of the patron. I don't believe the chips are defined anywhere. Number 13, number 6, Section 6, Management of Games of Chance. Line 10 should be representatives, not representative. Number 14, Section 1, 7.1, the licensee at the close of each day of operation and not later than. Could you please designate an end time? There's a lot of situations in these rules that there's no end time designated. So does that mean it's 24 hours or whenever someone decides to close the casino? I think there should be very strict times if this is what you're looking to do. Number 15, 7.4 default. This is where you talk about when the licensee does not provide documents on time. Suggested, licensed operations shall be suspended until such time as the default has been corrected. Should a second offense occur, the license shall be permanently terminated. You have only one chance. You mess up that chance, you're gone. Number 16, Section 7.5.1. And this is where we start talking about reports. I noticed throughout the rules and regulations, there's no date for there's no due date for the reports. I think we need to make sure there are due dates for your reports, if in fact you want clarity and accountability. So I suggest for Section 7.5.1, at the conclusion but not later than September 30th, 2019. Or 30 days, whichever occurs first. I'm assuming that this is going to end about the middle of August, but there should be a very clear end date, 30 days, you get the documents and wrap it up. And if you don't, somehow or other there needs to be, if you don't comply with this, that's it. You have tried to do this by giving a 60-day window. At what point do we say, this is over, no more festival, no more carnival, the documents are due, and then they can be submitted as well to the Office of the Public Auditor, which also is going to be auditing those numbers. Fast and furious and not any delay beyond that. Speaking of the OPA, the 17th recommendation, and again, I'll be submitting this to you, Section 7.5.2, the OPA shall publish and submit its report not later than October 30th, 2019, to the Speaker of the Legislaturan Guahan. And finally, number 18, determination of proceeds. please define what net proceeds means. You may even want to consider a whole definitions program because there are a lot of terms that are included here, but they don't have clear definitions, nor times, nor dates, nor due dates. With all due respect, I know there was an effort, but there was a rushed effort to put these rules together. Again, and that's why I go to the very beginning of my comment. You know, these rules are not intended for the mayors, they're not intended for you, they're not intended to the vendors. They're intended for the community. They're intended to protect the community because that's what you said you'd do. So if you're going to have these rules, get them accurate, complete, accountable, with strict due dates, strict beginnings, strict ends, and strict definitions. For a set of procedures and rules to talk about games of chance and not define what net proceeds are, I don't know. Do you guys know what net proceeds are? I have an idea because I've been campaigning against casino gambling for more than 15 years. Those are my suggestions.
Mr. Chair, I have a question, ma'am.
Yes, Senator.
I noticed you identified the determinants of the proceeds. I'm just surprised that you didn't mention when it says net proceeds versus gross proceeds. Because net is that's after all expenditures. Versus I'd be very curious to know what was collected first up front, and then we know how it's distributed.
Wouldn't you?
Yeah,
I would.
I was just surprised that you didn't.
Absolutely, you want to know the gross and the net. And I have seen in the 5 initiatives that we fought against that definition varies. So let's find out what the intent is for the 60 days. Is it grossed up? Is it net minus payouts or net after payouts and expenses? I don't know. It's not clear to me.
Okay,
It's clear to you. I love some clarification. That's it. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Do you have the changes of your own copy? Did you make those changes? Can we get a copy of that?
I wrote a note, but it's basically here. Yeah. Someone
As long as it's there.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Huh? Okay, let me call on the President of the Mayor's Council, Ms. Melissa Savares. Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to go ahead and yield to our Executive Director, who has...
Thank you, my boss. All of you two are my bosses. I'd like to, at the onset, say I'm Angel Sablon, Executive Director of the Mayor's Council of Guam. It's been a long day. We've been here almost all day, but I appreciate you still being here to come and listen to us. It just shows that you are truly servants of the people. And thank you, Jackie Prima, for your suggestions. At the outset, I just want to say that when the Magahaga signed the legislation into law, allowing for us to come up with rules and regulations on April 4th of this year, we were called together because she had asked Department of Revenue and Taxation to take the lead in making sure that all the regulatory parts of these rules and regulations would be headed by Daphne Shimizu and her staff. We had a member of the Attorney General's office there. We've had the staff people from the governor's office that were present, and we worked together. And some of the items that Jackie had brought up that are not in here is because it's already specified in the statute, in the original bill that was signed. Of course, on her suggestion for the 1.1, these games will be specified on what they are and how they are played in the rules that are given out in the bid packets. because even I mean, you know, I've seen Beto Beto, I know what color game is, big and small, but I don't play these other games. And her suggestion to not include but not limited to, well, that's in the legislation that was signed. We were just following the legislation, word for word. On the merchandise prices, I mean, we're going to ask vendors to put up the dollar value of their prices. I'm sure we could, but these are the trinkets that when kids play the dart balloon and the duck pond and the fish pond and things like that. I mean, we'll try, but if that's the merchandise pricing she wants us to, the vendors to put up, then, you know. It's never been done before in all the years I've seen the carnival, but of course there's always the first time. I already mentioned but not limited to, we were just following on 1.3, we were just following the statute the way it is. On 2.5 about security protocol, yes, it does say no minors, but the minors are defined further down in 5.8.1. No one under 18 will be allowed, and no one under 18 has ever been allowed to come in and play at the casinos that were operated before. As far as what types of ID card or driver's license, passport, I'm sure that, yes, we can put that into the rules and let the security personnel that are going to be at the entrance and exits of these games and at the color game, the big and small, and the Beto Beto, provide some kind of, yeah.
I'm sorry, Mr. Sablan.
We're gonna kind of just do a monological type of proceeding here, since we don't have that many to testify. So if any of the senators want to ask a question, or can you permit them to go ahead and ask the question? Thank you very much.
And I'd probably ask Reverend Tax to come up to the table so that if there's any questions on the regulatory part, if they can answer.
Sorry, Mr. Swan, just on that point that you were making, that's page 5, and that's 5.8.1 regarding the restriction minimum age. So it's my understanding that the bill that we passed was actually 21 years, not 18. Is that correct? Is it 18 or is it 21? Because these rules and regulations say 18. The law that was passed says 21. And then I also wanted to know what the penalty is for minors who are caught participating in these games of chance. Is there a penalty that's listed?
No, there is no penalty. They're just told to stop playing, or for the House of Cards that they cannot enter. I think the more concern about the underage is not within the House of Cards, because they will not be allowed to enter in the first place. It's these outside, the color game, the big and small, and the Beto Beto, because some people will just come right on up, put their dollar, walk away until they hear that, oh, they won, they turn back around, and yeah. So that's where we need to get some control. And it's been an issue in the past, okay. And we've actually asked security, look at that booth. There's like 3 or 4 there that don't look like they're over 14 years of age. Yeah. Can you please go over there and remove them? Yeah. Understood.
Okay, and if we could just get some clarity on this 18 or 21.
Yes, I will. We will.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, may I? I think one of the things in the law that was passed, one of the 8 requirements, was that an identification of security protocol, including how minors will not be impacted. So I think that has to be let out specifically, especially for everything that's outside of the card house.
Yeah, that's more of the concern, yes. and we will.
Yeah, thank you.
And then going on further, on 5.7.1, where it didn't say anything about games, machines. That's because that law has actually been repealed that allows for gaming machines. And so it's already in statute that no gaming machines shall be allowed for any kind of gambling. We only put this thing about the electronic minding devices is because some people, some bingos have been using those bingo readers, which I believe are illegal until there's another statute that is either proposed and passed, but
Actually, the bingo minders are not illegal. It is not even considered a gambling device. It's just an electronic device that transfers what is coming out from that box and telling the players that this is the number that's been recorded, but it's not illegal. And we went through all over the states in the United States, and that's what they use, bingo minders, and it's not an illegal for bingo minders. It's because it's not in no way is it considered a casino gambling device. It's only an electronic device that transfers
That's put in here at the
numbers.
suggestion of Revenue and Tax, so that's why it's there.
When we discussed the issue of bingo, one thing that came up, Senator, I'm sorry, for the record, my name is Daphne Shimizu, and I'm the Director of Revenue and Tax. And so when we discussed, and I believe that at the time we discussed it, I think that, and please, Executive Director Sablon, let me know if I'm misspeaking, but I believe that the Mayor's Council was okay with the idea of using or doing traditional bingo. So that's why this particular item was indicated here.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify and make that distinction that, the bingo minders is not an illegal machine. It is just an electronic device to transfer the numbers coming out from that box so that the players can easily, play faster and all that for the convenience. And that's what my bill went out with, and just to complement the players and make it faster. Because no one in his right state of mind can do that tabbing, 5 cards and over. So, no. Well, you can do that. But the bingo minders are making it easier for the players.
Now in the 5 bingo halls that are being operated, but if you're saying it's not illegal and they start using it, then I don't think we're going to be having any customers for bingo at the Liberation game if they're just going to start
I
dabbing
think,
everything.
Mr. Chairman, when we start talking about the bingo minding machine, there was a law that was passed last year, and you weren't the director then. The Department of Revenue and Tax had no problem with that bill. It passed. It concerned with the bingo minding machine. The problem is that none of the vendors went and got a license to get it. That was their biggest mistake. And the bingo mining machine is separate from slot machines, so I don't think we should need to discuss that any further. If this is going to go to dabber, there's plenty of dabbers for sale out in the market. We just work it and we worry about it when we get to the mining machine that Senator Terlaje is going to be bringing up that bill to bring it to terms. Okay.
Okay. And then I'm sorry, I skipped 5.5 operation location. Jack had brought up to make sure that we specify the official grounds. That actually will be specified in the proclamation that the governor issues for the authorization to operate these games. It will specify when and where and how in her proclamation.
Sorry to move backwards a little bit. It was discussed about an age. In the bill that was passed, there is no age on the bill, just to let you know. So these rules and regs would determine a minor as, 18. But according to the bill that was passed, it's now public law 35-4, there is no age.
And that was intentional, though, because we were thinking about putting that down on the rules and regs.
Okay. Well, it's 18 here in these rules and regulations. And then on 5.82, I agree, we should define what those official chips are. I mean, even the vendor wouldn't want anybody to take that chip and start producing it all over the place. I mean, we should define it. If it has to have a chip in it, if it has to have a special marker on it, if it, whatever, to make sure that it is an official chip only used for that operation, only for the 75th Liberation. Okay. So that's a good point.
Let's just go back to the chip, defining of the chip.
Mm-hmm.
Like in Las Vegas, everybody has a chip that they utilize with their signia on it of that particular hotel, and that's determined by that. And sometimes they even have like a harder chip that's embedded in there that makes it difficult to duplicate. So I'm pretty sure that whoever wins this bid will have those types of chips. So the definition of chips, could it say casino chips? Would that suffice as the definition you're looking for to identify what chips are as considered same type of chips in casino?
I think the goal is to make sure they're not replicatable, number one, but also, just like in a bank,
right?
The chips should be balanced in the beginning of the opening and then at the end. So
right.
That's basically your cash. And you don't want loose or fake chips out, either being in the public or being made, because then your balance is going to be off. You're going to end up with more chips at the end, and it's like, wait a minute, we didn't, and that's why even in some of the procedures for balancing out the numbers, it's really important to make sure that you have not only official chips,
right.
but your balance at the beginning of the day and your balance at the end of the day.
Okay, of course that would be a disadvantage to the vendor that's doing this. What I'm talking about, you want a definition.
Yes, a definition of what constitutes chips.
Do you have any recommendations?
I can get something for you, Senator, but I think that the notion is that it should not be replicatable.
Okay, that's okay. Well, that's easy. Okay. Just look up Las Vegas.
Just drill a hole in it and put my name on it.
This thing is only,
replicate it.
This thing is only 60 days. I'm pretty sure, only 60 days.
60
so.
days.
Well,
Okay. Oh, by the way, since I have the mic, I'm sorry, I seem to be hogging it there. There was a concern about net versus gross, the definition, and I would like Daphne to explain, because you were part of this making of the rules and regs. Can you identify the concern that Jackie has, please?
Okay. With regards to net proceeds versus gross proceeds, with regards to the way that nonprofits are taxed, and I guess this is something that I believe there was a bill that may have been introduced already to address this, and it was also brought up in the public auditor's performance audit on nonprofit limited gaming. So there is some conflict in the language. And with regards to gross receipts taxes for limited gaming for nonprofits, actually it's a net of payouts, meaning that of the revenues that come in, if there's any payouts, the gross receipts taxes are paid on the gross, GRT is paid on the gross minus any payouts. That's how it's calculated for gross receipts tax purposes. And again, I believe there's a bill that was introduced to address that, and that was an item that was brought up by the performance audit by the public auditor.
And thank you, Daphne, and I appreciate that definition too, so that we can incorporate it if there's any changes to the rules and regs. And Angel, you'll make sure we get that that definition, okay? Just work with her on the net, okay?
Also, before I forget, the determination of the proceeds. Can we make an addendum to that or an amendment to that? That the first gentleman would get the 40, the mayor's council would get the 40, and revenue tax would get the 10. Is that
90.
amenable to the director and the president?
Who gets the other 10?
The revenue tax will get the 10.
Sir, if you do 40-40, then revenue tax will get 20.
So you're willing to give revenue tax 20?
You know, they need assistance in regulating.
Because I'm pretty sure the Director of Revenue would really be elated with that 20%. I'm just recommending 10%.
You know, Mr. Chairman, we really thought about that, but our only difficulty is if we're really going to have it for revenue and tax, then they have to have an account to put it into. Because if it goes into the general fund, it's bye-bye 20%. They're not going to see it.
Well, let me just
have to
ask the
set up
Director.
a
Can you
special
set
account.
up a separate account for that? Is that 20%? I want to be clear on this one because is that 20 or 10?
If it's 10%, it'll be 45 for the first gentleman and 45 for the mayor's council. Then we can do 10%.
Okay,
for
then 10%.
revenue tax.
So, Madam Director, can I get your assurance that you will open up an account, separate account, so that the mayor's council can give you that 10%? Oh, all right. I don't know who's going to do it, but.
Mr. Chair, if I may, and just for a point of information, that amendment could be included into the policy that we will proceed forward as we look at the recommendations coming from here. When it comes to opening account based on the past experiences, I just want to note for the record, Mr. Chair, that this festivity was literally initiated in 1-15 in the first Guam legislature. And it was a fair to honor those who were liberated and those who survived and acknowledging the military. So when the mayors took over, and maybe not even 2 decades ago, maybe just half of that, maybe 3 or 4 terms ago, 2009, there was a recommendation from the Office of the Public Auditor to have a separate and apart, the recommendation to have a nonprofit organization initiated by the Mayor's Council, and then the funding be able to be placed there. Automatically, based on the statute, the existing statute, the percentage that goes to the First Lady, and in this case would be the first gentleman, that they would choose the nonprofit organization of their choice. So that's already created in statute. And then the other portion that it would be through policy that we could delineate. But that I know, if maybe the question is, does the Mayor's Council still have the nonprofit organization that exists, or has that been, so that still exists today?
Yes.
That's the question.
It does exist, yes.
So, Mr. Chair, if I may, that would be how the equation, it would not go in through the Mayor's Council of Guam. It would go based on that recommendation and what was created through the past audits that the nonprofit organization would receive that. So that's how it works today as prescribed.
However, I'm sorry, Mayor Savaras from Dedido. However, like Angel had mentioned, if revenue and taxation gets that 10%, it would go to revenue tax under a general fund. And of course, we don't know if revenue tax will be able to use the funding at that point unless they open a separate account to specifically for that fund.
Is there an account at revenue tax that can go for compliance, Daphne?
Hold on. Mr. Chairman, I think everybody needs to understand all accounts in the government of Guam is established by the Department of Administration. It's not by the Department of Revenue and Tax. They collect all the money, but they write down the account number that it goes to. Okay, so we need to pause when we want to talk about revenue and tax. You can collect all the money, but until you know what account it's going to go into, it goes into the treasurer. DOA controls it. I understand where Angel's coming from. They lost in general fund. But if the account is written down, then there's accountability there. I wanted to get back to, other than the accounts, I'm concerned about, I see compliance officers here. What is the cost it's going to cost? Because I see on page 5, compliance officers on 5.6.1, access to game of chance. What do you need access for? If you're going to give out chips, I don't know how many folks in here are familiar with the Greyhound, how it was set up. They used to have compliance officer at the Greyhound. They never had to walk around. They watched the money come in, They knew how much went in, and they knew exactly what was going on, and they made sure, and I think the deputy director was the deputy director then, no? No, you weren't, no, it was before your time. And what happens is Department of Revenue and Tax makes sure that the proper tax document is issued right there on the spot. There's no debate about as far as accountability. It's accounted for from the minute they open until the minute they close. And I think that's what a lot of folks are looking at, is accounting for that money. And that saves the mayors of worrying about it, because if you're talking about a chip, you go to the cage, you buy the chip, the compliance officer sitting right there. He don't need to roam. He's not getting paid to roam. He's not doing an inspection. He's there to account for every penny going in. And when somebody comes to cash out, and he comes to cash out a lot of money, a lot of chips, the revenue and tax guy is there to say, come, boy, you need to sign this because you owe taxes. And it's just unfortunate if he carries everybody's chips and he wants to cash it all one time. And I think that's what we need to look at in this rules, because it doesn't exist. And I don't know how revenue and tax is going to account for it. In this kind of rules, it'll never fly. And I think you're seeing that more now, Daphne. You know, Madam Director, I just want to make sure we're very careful with this, because there's money.
Kind Senator, if I may also, I mean, that was why I was asking about identification. So if we have people who are non-U.S. citizens gambling there, and they go to cash the chips, who gets, what are they taxed? Are they taxed anything? Did they get the gross amounts because they're not U.S. citizens? No social security number, so I don't know.
We talked about this actually on the floor. I think it's a 1099, 1044, 1099. So just to explain a little bit, if somebody goes to the cashier and brings their chips to cash out for cash, at the cage, there's a 1099 form that's available that's there, that the cashier must give to the person cashing out. If it's a certain amount of money, that 1099 is given, and they must fill it out before they can get their cash. There's the accountability right there. They don't get their cash unless they fill out a 1099. It's very simple. I don't believe there was anybody at Rev and Tax that was there in the past, but I do know that. You don't get your money until you fill out that 1099.
Yeah, but the 1099 is turning into revenue and tax on an annual, yearly basis. That's where you don't take your 1099 and just submit your 1099 to revenue and tax anytime you want to. The 1099 purpose is you get taxed for your winnings, and you reported it after the end of the year as an income. That's what it is.
I think maybe the director and deputy director can answer that. When 1099s are issued, the office that's issuing the 1099 has to turn it in. The individual that has to file the tax is annually. Let's not be mistaken. When you're issued a 1099, that agency or private firm that issues it turns it in. They don't wait till the end of the year. When it's done, it's done. Okay, so don't be mistaken that they're waiting till the end of the year. When that company is done with that 1099 and they issue the check out, they have no need for it. They just keep a copy, turn it into revenue and tax. Revenue and tax now monitors that in the income tax brackets. That's when other folks get involved, and that's seen. I know that's seen on the computers because I've seen it before.
Never mind. Just. Is there anybody that wants to testify and we're gonna settle that 10% revenue tax, because I promised revenue tax that you know, we have to do something about some of your expense that is not accounted on your budget, and you're using a lot of money there. We found being appropriated for that. That's why I'm asking you that for 10%. And this is not coming from me. This is coming from higher up. So.
Thank you, Senator. Actually, we had done an initial calculation but because it wasn't exactly clear what the hours were, but we did come up with an estimate, which we did share with the Mayor's Council of Guam on how much it would cost us for compliance officers for the 60 days. And our initial calculation was a little bit over $70,000. But again, that probably needs to be further refined, and perhaps I think as well, even once these rules and regs are further refined, and then if there's any additions or adjustments to our rules, that also has to be taken into consideration. But we thank you for recognizing the fact that we do need some funds in order to make sure that we're going to be able to comply with the law.
Is there anyone else that wishes to speak in regards to the subject matter right now?
I have a question. Is there someone from the mayor's office or mayor's council that will be there every night during the casino? There will be somebody there monitoring, right? You have somebody every night to be there to ensure that. So
We've done it before.
yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Good. 70,000. Huh?
We make the mayors take turns.
Okay. Yeah. Everybody takes turns to do their part, and I
Yes.
appreciate that to
So
ensure
after
that.
all, they're getting some money out of this, so
Exactly.
we
Thank you.
try to make them all
Okay.
earn their money. On 7.5 final reports, it's not, the dates aren't specified here because it's actually specified in law. It tells you when those reports are due. And on the 7.52, we did put 30 days after within 30 days after the Liberation Day Carnival, which at this point, if the carnival ends on August 3rd, then by September 3rd.
Mr. Chair, it would be wise that whenever rules or regulations are written, even though it's written in statute, you can't assume that the enforcement agency is going to go to the statute. No, because your rules are supposed to incorporate all of that.
Okay.
So in other words, if there's something in law, when you write the rules, it's to make clarification and to remind everybody of the law. That's how GARs are written. The Guam Administrative Rules and Regulations are written. You're supposed to put the clarification and to clear the air so that nobody questions like we're doing it now, Angel.
Can we refer to Public Law 35-4?
No, you just put in the information.
Okay.
And
Well.
it solidifies what is there and it makes it clear for you.
Not difficult. We
Right.
will do it.
I was just concerned, Madam Director, you mentioned 70,000. What is that 70,000 for? Is that $20 an hour, 8 hours a day? What?
Well, what we did was we actually, and this is before, I guess, all of the final times for the carnival was identified, but what we did was we calculated the cost for our actual staff that would be on the grounds, and we weren't sure if it was going to be 24 hours. So we calculated it at 3 shifts of 8 hours each, 2 compliance officers, and that was for 60 days. But, excuse me, but what we didn't take into consideration was that if there was 2 House of Cards, that we may need more compliance officers, so that may be something that we may have missed, Senator. The other thing, I'm sorry, go
But
ahead.
when you say compliance officer, what? Compliance officer 1, 2, 3, 4? I'm talking about the title?
It's actually a combination because we based it on our actual staffing pattern.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's actual head count. One thing though, with regards to, I'm sorry, is it okay if I go to 7.5.1?
Well, I wanted to go further on
Okay.
first on the value of the compliance officer. We keep in mind that the officers work 8 hours a day, Monday to Friday. When you
Right.
start this, is there night differential? Is there over? I mean, I
Yes.
just want to make sure you
Yes.
you factor that.
Well, we can again look at it further, but we did request for our COA to include night differential and any overtime if there was needed. And again, we can go back and refine it further, I guess, based on the final regs and the actual need. But we did do that estimate already. Yeah. But sorry, Mr. Chairman, is it okay if I just add something, a comment that we may have missed in our initial reading?
Go ahead.
So if we go to 7.5.1, because number 5 indicates the total amount of business privilege taxes and other taxes collected, I just wanted to ask or recommend that if this is the case, that we be given until at least the following month after GRT is filed so the month subsequent to the end of the Liberation Carnival, the last day of the subsequent month for us to be able to provide or complete the filing of this report, only because, so for example, if it ends on August 5th, the gross receipts taxes are not going to be reported and filed until September 20. And so it will be difficult for us to provide a complete report to the legislature and to the speaker if we don't have that information. So if we could just at least have until at least the last day of the following month. So if August is the end of the Liberation Carnival, then September 30. But that's just a recommendation. Okay.
Let me just, I'm trying to understand why you're asking for the following month when there's I understand, but she's not running the business. It's the mayor's running it. All you're accounting for is whatever's accountable on the chips and stuff. I mean, and whatever needs to be run, it's the mayors that will be running it. I mean, if you're running a business, you got to file it at the 20th of every month, no matter what. I just don't want you to be the one.
Okay.
It's just, I don't know. I think the amount you're asking for is even too little then. There's going to be a lot of things you're going to be required to do.
Yes.
And there's a role that I honestly believe the intent was only for you to assist. Mm-hmm. When you start taking a major role in this, your deputy's going to probably have headache and probably be on leave real soon. Okay, I just wanted to warn you.
Thank you. Thank you. It's just that on 7.5.1, there is a specific section regarding a report by the Department of Revenue and Taxation. And so we were just a little concerned, and we didn't catch this in the first reading, perhaps, but I thank you, Ms. Marati, for pointing out that there's a need for a deadline. But if there is a deadline set, just that it be set so that it's reasonable, because we will not be able to advise on the amount of taxes collected if it's before the filing date for GRT. Is that
Duly
okay,
noted.
Senator?
Madam Director, we got that. Duly noted.
Thank you.
I have one more question. Angel, in the law that was passed, the public law, there was no time on there. So, you know, when issuing out a bid for something like this, you know that the person doing this bid has to make some type of money. You know, they're putting out all this money, you know, and they have expenses and stuff, and plus you guys are making money. So I do realize that time is important, you know, to allow them enough time throughout the day. I mean, we all realize that, I think we all agree that 2 a.m. is the cutoff? Is that, okay. But what time does it start? So what might be very helpful for the amendment in this is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday is from this time, the carnival opens to this time. Friday, Saturday, you know, Sunday from this time to, and then in the event there is a holiday, there's a holiday the next day, which it might be on a Sunday or Monday, whatever, Liberation. By the way, 21st lies on a Monday. Monday. So, you know, if there's a holiday the next day or, you know, no work, you can add that 2 a.m. You can add that 2 a.m. to that. So it would be very helpful knowing that we already know how many days that this can be open for, right? Put those dates down and weekday, weekends, you know. Okay, can you do that, please? And it's specific.
The proposed time now is actually 5 p.m. to midnight, Monday to Thursday, and then 5 p.m. to 2 a.m. on Friday and Saturday.
And let's
back
go
to
ahead
Sunday and on holidays. I mean, Saturday and Sunday, I'm sorry. Saturday and Sunday, we want to open a little earlier. Right. Have the kids be able to, because it's going to be a big carnival.
Like
so
10 a.m.
we also want the outside vendors to be able to make their investment
money back too as well.
So we're looking at 12 noon.
Okay, so if you can just write that down, you know, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Thank you so much. Okay.
Let me just finalize this. As Madam Director, as long as they agree with that 10%, the Speaker and I will work it out on how we're going to reserve that. And either bill at the account of the bank or whatever, will be revenue tax, but the 10%, as long as they say it's okay. Afa? Okay, okay. So I'll work it out with the speaker.
You're my favorite.
Even if we have to turn into a bill.
The only other thing I want to bring up, Mr. Chairman, is that, we did list down the minimum bid, but we need to put a provision in there that if we don't get any of these minimum bids, to allow the Mayor's Council of Guam to go out for a request for proposal and see who has the best proposal to come in and do something. Because these are here, but we don't know whether, like Senator tell us that the time difference, things like that. So that'll be an option. Or we have to reduce the amount of minimum bid. Okay?
Half a day. So in going over the bill as it was passed, I'd like some clarification so that I can find in the packet where the information is, or so that we can make sure it gets in there. So on page 3 of the bill, there's a section number 7. So, yeah, in 7 it says that in this set of rules, there will be an identification of projected revenues. So I'm not quite sure exactly how that's addressed in the rules and regulations. There's the minimum bid that you were referring to, but do you know what is specifically answering the identification of projected revenues?
It's actually on 2.4.
Okay, that was a section that was added in from the original one that was sent to our offices. So I'm glad to see that that one's there. And then for number 8, an identification of maintenance plans. Is that one in here as well in the updated version?
Yes, it is. 2.6.
Oh, 2.6, there it is, good. Okay, good. Also, and just wanting to make sure that there's a little bit more clarity. So I know that there's been discussion about days and hours. I do think putting those in would be really helpful. It keeps it just really understandable. And it is very helpful to hear the hours of 5 p.m. to midnight rather than just some sort of blanket statement about during the festival, or the carnival, sorry. So on 3.1 in B, I think amongst us all, we've talked about 60 days, but if that could just be put in there, I think that just keeps it clear this time and in the future that it's always that 60-day period that we're all talking about, so that doesn't ever get lost, perhaps, or changed. I know also that there's been talk about some suggestions about penalties. So there are a couple of areas, 5.1 and 7.4. It does seem that it would be good to have something there just to provide incentive that the vendors are going to want to be following what you want of them. And what we want for the community. So I think providing some incentive there by saying, if this becomes a problem, however it's worded, that there are people found repeatedly who are under the age of 18, then there would be something that they would have to be doing. And the same for if they're not filing their reports properly, it will be in your best interest to not have to be going back to them over and over again, but just give them incentive to want to get those reports right the first time. So if you could be thinking about how that would best work out, and then we could be re-examining it. In 5.2, it seems that a definition there, or maybe just a different word choice, where it says active member. I'm not really sure I understand the meaning of member, where it says the officers of a licensee shall designate a bona fide active member, but then it doesn't say member of what. So I think that could be clarified, and then it just makes it clear in that relationship between you and the vendor as well. One of the things you will be wanting to ask, I believe, for the person who prepared this for you to clear up is there's a contradiction between 5.4 and 4.2, where with the different hours, it's spelled out in 5.4, but then in 4.2 it says, no license shall entitle any organization to hold, operate, or conduct operating of any game or games outside of the official time. So I guess if that's the official time, but I think the clarity that you were saying earlier with the 5 p.m., the midnight, and the 2 a.m., that will just make it all clear, and then it will have that official time in there. Let me see if there was anything else. So it looks like, oh, for 7.5.1, for the final report, so it says it shall be submitted to the governor and the Office of Public Accountability, but I think it would be good for the legislature to receive a copy of that as well, since we've been in the process since the beginning. So I think it would be good for us to get a report there as well. I think about everything else that I was looking at was covered, but I think that will just help unify it all, make it all clear, and get it on. And as was mentioned, I guess the last thing popping into my mind, as was mentioned previously, just figuring out a way to define the boundary of the fairgrounds. It seems very clear when we're here, but then out in the situation, people sometimes push those boundaries. And so again, to give you a strong grounds to stand on, to make sure that they're following it properly and not creating an issue for you guys, just to figure out a way to make that the boundaries really clear of the fairgrounds. So.
Is there anybody else that wishes to testify? At this point in time, I want to call on Senator Terlaje.
Thank you. Thank you.
Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you very much. Could you just clarify, Mr. Sablan, so the projected revenue, you're calculating 580,000, assuming that each of the available number of slots is awarded at the minimum bid level. So that's the only revenue. It's they bid, and then you have a list of how many of House of Cards 2, Beto Beto 2, like that. But then if you go to the back and you start talking about the proceeds, so you're only talking about dividing the 580,000? And is that all?
Hopefully it's more. But
how would it
yes.
be more? How would it be more?
Well, if they bid more than the minimum bid.
Oh.
Yes.
Is that common?
Yes,
oh.
yes,
all
it
right.
is.
But then all of the proceeds, I mean, not, I guess I'm using the word proceeds, but all of the spending in a night, you have no interest in.
That's correct. No.
I see.
All we work off on are the bids that are paid to operate the concession.
Okay. Mrs. Shimizu, did you, when you were talking about the electronic mining devices, does DRT have a ruling on that, or a definition or something that led you to prohibit it?
Like I mentioned earlier when we were discussing this, I believe it actually was brought up that during our meetings with the Mayor's Council, that the idea was that this would just be traditional bingo. So we just wanted to clarify what traditional bingo is. And traditional bingo is really just the playing of bingo with the actual bingo cards. There's no, and we refer back to the Internal Revenue Code or the language that was provided by the IRS with regards to bingo when we're talking about traditional bingo. And again, traditional bingo doesn't allow the use of electronic cards. So that's why we just wanted it to be clear.
According to the rules, would revenue tax be able to determine every night the gross amount that the vendor is making?
Would we? Well, so the idea is that, of course, there's some it's self-reporting, really, right? Because truly, with regards to the card games, well, the idea is that they would be reporting on a nightly basis or a daily basis how much they're making every day. Also, we would be there. I think Ms. Marathi also mentioned the idea of making sure that there's a cash in and a cash out, so there's some type of a balancing, and so. You know, again, it's really going to be, I guess, incumbent on the vendor, and there's somewhat of an honor system as well. But they have to be the ones to report. The vendors will report.
But you're there. But revenue tax is right there.
Right, we are there, and the idea is, I believe, with regards to the compliance, and you know, again, you can. With the Mayor's Council can correct me if I am misunderstanding, but I believe the majority of our time would be spent actually monitoring the House of Cards. And I believe that was the idea, just making sure that that's very closely monitored, because I think in terms of the amount of the revenue or monies that's generated, I believe that it was believed that that would be the area that would have the most amount of money, and perhaps then where the most control would be needed.
All right, but is it feasible that you're going to do what Ms. Marathi described? You're going to, in the beginning of the night, calculate how many chips are going to be used, or how many chips are being divvied up, and then at the end to account for those?
Yes, you would have to know how many chips you start with, and
but
then
I'm
what
asking
you
if
end
revenue
with.
tax is going to be responsible to know that, yes.
Right, and
Yes.
we actually have our compliance supervisor here, and we've talked in length about this with regards to at least the House of Cards, and so we believe that it is going to be possible to account for those in the beginning and the end.
All right. So you would be able to give us an estimate. One of the issues with the past casino was that when we saw the reports and it was much later, it just didn't look right to some people, and I'm not an expert, but so I guess we want to know from Revenue Tax if they would be able to say, yes, this is how much we believe was in dealings that night. You know, how much money is accounted for?
So, excuse me, so part of our original discussions at the DRT was that we would have compliance officers only, and then we talked about even the possibility of even having perhaps some like tax enforcement people, because they're really the ones, our compliance people really, they monitor for different things, and they're not experts in the area of tax enforcement. So we talked about also having some tax enforcement people, perhaps tax examination, people from examination, or even our criminal investigation branch who are very well versed in this, so that way they can, I guess, work to try to calculate and make sure that the numbers are accurate.
So may I ask what the compliance officers are there for? Is it to check ages?
Well, right. So the compliance officers are there to check ages. They're also there because we talked about ensuring that, for example, that there's no chip running on the floor, so that way all cash is really controlled, and if there's any chip purchasing, those chips are purchased within a cage or within a controlled area. That was very important to us and also to the mayors when we were discussing that, making sure that there's really good controls. So our compliance people would be making sure that none of those things are happening.
Have you calculated how many employees are needed by rev and tax? You said 24-hour shifts. You calculated to come up to $70,000, but how many employees? Oh, that would be 3 shifts.
Right. So originally we were not exactly sure of the times, and so you know, we were working to clarify.
24 hours?
So our original calculation, if we were using 2 compliance officers, 24 hours. Sorry, 2 compliance officers for 3 8-hour shifts, right? So 8 times 3 is 24. Right, so if that's a 24-hour period, 2 compliance officers for the 60 days, including night differential and I believe overtime, our chief of administration calculated that it would cost a little bit over $70,000. We hadn't, I guess, addressed the issue of perhaps if there's more than 1 house of cards, which may require additional compliance people. But those are things, again, you know, which we can provide additional estimates. I guess once that's all
so that's
finalized.
But the rules say there's a maximum of 2 house of cards, and so you've calculated this is for 1.
Correct, right. So initially we were we had calculated just based on having 2 people and 1 house of cards.
Okay, and you haven't included the tax enforcement officer?
No, we had not.
All right, and then just one more thing, because I know there's others that want to ask questions, but okay, so it says on number 8, section 8, the determination of proceeds. The proceeds are used to fund the events related to the carnival, right? Memorial events hosted throughout the months, fireworks, and other events traditionally associated with the fair and carnival. But again, I guess, so we're only talking about the 580, and so this will be taken off of the 580,000, and then it will be, whatever's left after all of this will be split in half. And
well, Senator, some of these events here, like memorials and parade and fireworks, they do have corporate sponsors, and we rely on that too. So if they do have sponsors for the memorials, obviously those money won't be coming out of the liberation concession fees. Parade is not a money maker, but you know, it does generate some funds from advertisements and things like that. So not the whole amount. Whatever they don't cover from corporate sponsorship or donations, of course we would tap into the liberation concession fees.
all right, it just seems a little open-ended to me, not clear how you end up with anything in the end, you know, especially that line, and other events traditionally associated with, seems pretty vague. But okay, I understand. Yes. Okay, Mr. Chair, thank you very much.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, si Jus Masi, I know I'll make this really short. Maybe just a clarification based on the proposal that Director Daphne spoke about in as far as the timeline. So the opening for the games of chance will only be during the times the carnival is operating. So the Saturday, the Sunday, the Monday through Friday. When the carnival closes, the games of chance, all of them are closed. Is that correct?
Goes to 2 a.m.
Right.
Because the rest of the carnival closes at midnight.
Right. So the maximum time on an evening that goes up to 2 a.m. would be from 5 in the evening
to 2.
2 a.m.
That's only Friday and Saturday.
Just so that we can get a better clarification based on the numbers that she proposed, because I guess now, if we're doing 2 house of cards, then it's more compatible. If we're doing 1, then unless we include the compliance officer, that probably wasn't included in the equation. So I just wanted to make that clarification. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
If there's any more...
On page 6, it talks about after the page 5, the conduct of house of cards. No license, there's no way unless the Department of Revenue and Tax actually floods that carnival with a bunch of agents to look at how much money is floating around. There's no way you're going to know if somebody's floating so much money out there. And I'm not saying bait to bait is going to be big money, but trust me, it can get big money. And I think, Angel, you and I both know that. It can get big money. And I'm only concerned that other than the house of cards, when you have a lot of money floating, Tibali, 1099 at the House of Cards when the big money's outside. Okay? And I know that folks asked the question about if they were foreigners. That's why they got passports, use that for a form of identification. So there's a way of tracking people. But I'm only concerned is that, and I was actually leaning towards that every game dealing with money, other than the kids' game and the rides, we use currency, but everybody else, when you're dealing with, not the word gambling, but the game of chance, it should use the chips. Only because then there's real control. Then when the revenue agents or any other, even GPD walks around and they see money on the beto, real cash, they can actually seize the property right there because it's considered illegal gambling because it's not controlled no more. The chips are, and I don't know if anybody wants to consider that, but when you're dealing with currency, chips should, if chips starts, then chips ends it. And it just keeps it clean. Because then you know exactly. Because I don't know how revenue tax is going to total it every night. Because if somebody wins and says, I'll cash it tomorrow, whatever you start with tonight, you will not balance out the end of the night. Because if the guy goes, I'll cash tomorrow you cash, I don't know if you have enough chips to keep selling every day. You know what I mean? I put my chips at home, I keep a souvenir or whatever, and next you know, they do this even at the casinos in the States. I mean, I have a lot of chips from Vegas. I don't want to even care to cash it out. No, I just keep for souvenir. And I'm only concerned about that. You'll never balance. All you know is they sold the chips, but never came back. That's already money in the pot. But I'm only concerned about the other games that we're talking about U.S. currency. It's not a kid's game, fishing. It's not a ride. It's game of chance. And that was one of the things that a lot of people were asking for. So I'd just like to offer that maybe we consider the chips for those. And then it just clears that in. And it makes it easier for all of you guys. You know already it's gone. I don't know how you're going to buy all the chips, but I know you can get it real easy from... It's going to be rough. But something to consider. It's for everybody else to consider. Okay?
Angel, I have a question, Mr. Chair. Angel, in the past, in the last 15 years of the carnival that I've known, or even further back, if I'm not mistaken, Beto, the color game, pay red, pay red, pay red. There's never, ever been chips. Beto, there's never, ever been chips. Big and small, the same thing. These are like people coming up with the dollar bill and putting it on the color and doing. Now, Texas Hold'em, Pasoy, Baccarat, Blackjack, Monte, that is all can be controlled by chips. Those are the big money areas. But I remember when I was young, used to walk by that. I used to, actually, when I was younger, I worked at a color game, 76, 2000, 1976. At the color game, but it's never had chips. So is that the case? In all these years, have you ever had chips on pay red, pay red? How about Beto? Oh, I'm sorry, let me let you answer, sorry.
No, we've never had chips on big and small, Beto, color game,
okay, and
over and under when we used to have it.
And these games of chance are usually outside of the casino, correct?
That's correct.
Along with all the other games, right?
Yes.
Okay, there's never been a problem. Okay, thank you.
Well noted.
Let me just...
Ladies and gentlemen, we need to wrap this up because we have another hearing right after this, and by law we have to stop by 10 o'clock. So public hearing on proposed rules and regulations related to permit games of chance at the Guam Island Fair and Liberation Carnival pursuant to Public Law 35 for reference message communication doc number 35GL 1903-61 is now adjourned.
But Mr. Chairman, just before you adjourn ours,
and the time is 7:27.
I just want to know.
9:27.
What do we do next? I mean, we've gone through this hearing for these rules and regs. Who's going to make these amendments? Is it us or is it And do we have to submit it and have another hearing, or?
And Joe, maybe we can all get together and just iron this thing out. Yeah, because we're gonna have to make the changes, because I agree with some of the testimony, Jackie's testimony.
So once we make those changes, we resubmit them, and then it just goes through your
No, not
session?
resubmit them, we just follow that and just agree on that. This is the right thing to do.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Chairman.
you.
We just want to know what's the next step, so that following this hearing, there will be no additional public input on the rules, and you are going to make those amendments as offered. Is that correct?
I don't think there's gonna be another public hearing for this one.
Okay, so when will the public have a copy of the rules and regulations, sir?
We'll just put it down on the record. That is it.
I think we're going to need copies of the rules and regulations, with all due respect, sir.
Well, we're gonna make some changes on the rules and reg and reinforce that based on your recommendations. But then as far as coming out with another public hearing on this one, we're gonna make those changes as.
I think, Jackie, I think what you wanted to hear was all the amendments that made by his committee has to go to the floor for a vote to get
Yes.
out. Okay, so by the time it reaches that point, then we'll know where it's going to go.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
We just want to make sure it's available to the public, that's all.
Definitely.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. It's 9:38.
Hey, can we have a copy of the next bill?
No. Let's finish this.
42.
Can we approve that?
No, it's just,
Why don't we just?
no, there's some people.
Joe,
Just go and say number 42.
You don't want me to read this down? Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Buenas noches a todos. This confirmation hearing by the Community and Public Safety, Board of Safety, Military and Veterans Affairs, Mayor's Council, Infrastructure and Public Transit is hereby called to order. For the record, and in accordance with Section 8107 of Chapter 8.5 GCA, the first public hearing notice was sent out on Wednesday, April 10, 2019, adhering to the 5 working days notice, and the second public hearing adhering to the 48 hours notice was sent out on Friday, April 12, 2019. And in addition, this public hearing was given to the legislature on their website. The time now is 9:30.
9:31 for bill number 42.
Bill 42.
Dash 30.
Dash 35.
Is there anyone who wishes to speak besides Mr. Juanito, sir?
Do I have to go through all this?
Yeah, no, just say.
Never
if
mind.
there's anybody who wants to speak.
Is there anybody that wants to submit or testify, oral testimony? You can come up front. Oh, we got 2. Let me just add something to this one. Bill number 4235, COR is amended and further amended by the Committee on Public Safety and the Committees, Board of Safety, Military and Veterans Affairs, and Mayor's Council, Infrastructure and Public Transit, an act to grant administrative jurisdiction of a 6,120 square meter portion of Lot 5109 REM Municipality of Tamuning to the Guam Regional Transit Authority. Let me just introduce to my left, Senator Kelly Mars, Senator Joe San Agustin, Senator Amanda Shelton, Senator Telo Taitawi, Senator Therese Terlaje, our Speaker, Senator Tina Muna Barnes, and myself, say Pedo Terlaje, the chairman for this committee. Go ahead, ma'am.
Senators, I'm Ginger Porter. I'm a former member of the Board of Guam Regional Transit Authority, but I come here as a person of the public to ask a few questions about the lot that is in this bill. I found no map attached to this, And so therefore, since I'm always looking at access, I'm not able to determine whether this is a good accessible location for our transportation disadvantaged population. So my concern is not so much the fact that it is identified for a maintenance facility, but my concern would be for an office. If this office is to serve the public and is to be accessible by individuals who do not utilize their own transportation but rely on public transportation. So the question is, would a map of the area regarding this particular lot and the amount of land that's indicated, is it one that has pedestrian access? Is it an area that has street lighting? Because is it safe at night? If it's used as an office and it's utilized for board meetings and input from the public, it needs those amenities for safety, particularly street lighting and pedestrian access. It also needs to have access to fixed route, and is it a good area to put a fixed route in? Excuse me. So I have questions about it. I just looked at it this evening, so I don't really have a lot to add other than the fact that access is essential. And access is essential for those people who don't drive, and it needs to be safe. So thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Joe, go ahead.
My name is Joseph Borja, the Acting Director of the Department of Land Management. Relative to the intent and the information in Bill 42-35, number one, the correct lot identification number is lot 5109-REM, Municipality of Tamuning. The correct map for the lot is 393FY2018. The correct land area for the lot is 6,120 square meters. And finally, a determination whether the federal agency granting the funds to GRTA finds and accepts administrative jurisdiction as an acceptable form of transfer for site control, or whether fee simple or leasehold is necessary. Thank you.
Joe, I need to talk to Mr. Babauta about the federal funds that supposedly to have been reserved for something like this, and I'm not sure. I don't think I can answer you right now, but I'll get to you later on. But I'll talk to Mr. Babauta on what, because I think these funds has been there since 2014, if I can say, and we need to use it right away. But we need to do some legal research on this one. So, Joe, thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you, Senator.
Any questions from the senators?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Borja, the property identified, this is the property that's in the compound of Public Works, and it's actually right now, because I went by and I took a look there. I just wanted to confirm it with you, because I know you're pretty familiar with the properties there. Because there was a question brought up by one earlier, and that they asked about access. Will you, if they're given that property, who would be opening the property to access it from Harmon Industrial Park? Do you know?
No, that would depend on the site plan that they provide, prior to construction.
Okay.
So it would be up to the developer, GRTA, to provide the site plan as to where the access might be, whether there's street lights, whether there's pedestrian traffic. That would be determined by the developer of the property, which would be GRTA.
Okay.
Okay. Because I'm pretty sure that, under the federal financing, those amenities and other stuff like street lights and accessibilities will be in the plan before they even start the construction. So I'll even check with Chel Babauta, and I'll even review the plan if or not those things are really secured in the plan. Okay. Anything else? Senator Therese, go ahead, ma'am.
Yes, thank you for your testimony. Joe, what is the current designation or plan for this property?
Actually, it was part of the DPW compound, or is part of the DPW compound. This 6,000 square meter has been severed out by a map that was done in 2018. But it's basically an M1 industrial area. Yeah.
So the property would remain M1?
The property will remain M1 unless, because of it being a maintenance facility, I would assume that that would involve repair of vehicles and things like that. So,
on page 2 of the bill on line 13, it says the location of the 6,120 square meter shall be at the discretion of GRTA. I thought you said it's mapped out already, so why is it at the discretion?
I'm not sure, you have to talk to the author about that, but the 6,120 has already been determined. And that, of course, was through an MOU, a request by GRTA, so that determination has already been made, that this is where they wanted it. It was surveyed, mapped out, map was recorded.
All right, so but this was supposed to be used by DPW before?
DPW.
Was it reserved when it was reserved under the, not going to the land trust? It was reserved for a specific purpose? Correct, yes.
No, they were actually kind of grandfathered in. DPW has been in existence in that location for decades.
So this is part of DPW's?
This is part of DPW's compound.
All right.
Or was part of the DPW's compound. Now that it's been severed out, it's out of the compound.
Okay, so, wait, it says the purpose is for developing and construction a maintenance and office facility. Is that okay under the industrial zone? You're saying yes?
The maintenance definitely is, and you would assume that, the maintenance facility would have an office.
Mrs. Porter, can I ask you a question, please? Yes, thank you. Is what you were describing about accessibility and safety, are you aware that it's supposed to serve a maintenance and office facility purpose?
I'm aware that for years we've been looking for a location for maintenance, and it's appropriate for maintenance. And if the office refers to a maintenance office, that's appropriate. If the office refers to an office of GRTA that is to serve the public and the ridership, I do not believe, I have questions as to whether this is an appropriate location. And those are my concerns about the accessibility, the lighting, pedestrian pathway.
Right. What was the purpose that you were thinking it was for? Because I had run into another person who thought it was for that, I guess there's a previous law that authorizes GRTA to use the land across from JFK.
That's correct. So if that is going to proceed, I think that's an appropriate location for an office. It was never, that plan never intended to be the maintenance area.
All right. Is the access to this property, Joe, is it from the main road coming off of Route 1 in through Harmon?
Yes, it's actually behind the Preston.
I'm sorry, can you turn on the microphone?
It's actually located behind the present GTA facility.
Right, so do you access it from the main Harmon entrance? I mean, I'm calling it, the road that comes off of Route 1 into Harmon Industrial Park. Is that how we're going to access this property?
Yes, it has frontage on that road, yes. That's how you would access it, according to the map.
Does DPW have any concerns about that?
I don't know, it's whether they even looked at this bill or even the map, I'm not sure.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, if I may, if I can close out, I know that the executive manager is not here, Mr. Selbabauta, but I just wanted to ask you, based on the testimonies provided by Ms. Porter, I wanted to see, did DPW have an MOU that you are aware of or have seen in reference to this piece of parcel that was carved out for them?
Not that I know.
Okay. Yes.
Mr. Chairman, for clarification for some of my colleagues, I've been to the site. I had GRTA, Mass Transit folks take me to the site. If you're not familiar with it, when you enter into Public Works, you go into the bus operation. You pass the former pump station, you head to the back, you make a left, you pass the garage, the maintenance field. When you go in the area, you'll find, you'll find dump trucks, fire trucks. It's basically a junkyard right now.
That's correct.
And there is no means to enter that compound other than through Public Works. If they're going to enter through the backside, like Ms. Porter was asking, they'd have to open up an entrance on the Harmon Industrial Park site. There is no sidewalk there. That is not a walking path. That is just main road. So, and I hear what Mr. Borro was mentioning, that it'll be all about how they coordinate the building. And it was Chamorro Land Trust property, and I think that's how that MOU was created. There's just a mixture of things, but the property is very small.
Is it Chamorro Land Trust property?
It was at one point.
Not that I know.
It was, yeah. I saw that.
Was it ever? Why are we getting testimony that it's Chamorro Land Trust property? To your knowledge, not.
To my knowledge,
and
no.
Is it possible, if you've designated this lot a separate lot and you transfer it like this bill proposes to give administrative authority to mass transit, that you're going to allow access through DPW to access mass transit's property? I mean, is that done?
I can't speak to that. That would be, GTR would be the one, GRTA would be the one to determine that.
All right, that doesn't seem feasible to me either. Okay, thank you very much.
But Senator, they do have an access to the back.
According to Mr. Borja, the only access is from the main road into Harmon.
No, they do have an entrance from the back road going to Harmon, going up that way, almost right across Olimpicado.
Is that right, Mr. Borja?
Yeah, let's say you're coming up from Agana, you pass the traffic light, the main entrance to DPW, then
Yes.
you come up to the next traffic light, you make a right-hand turn.
Where GTA.
GTA is
All
on the
right.
corner.
Yes.
It's right behind that building.
Correct.
And this lot has frontage on that road going
Right.
into Harmon
And is that the
Industrial.
only access to this property without going through DPW's property?
Well, there's a bull cart trail, coming from the back that varies in width from 6 to 10 feet. There's on the map here it shows a bull cart trail. I would assume that for planning purposes that's where the entrance to that, but I can't speak for GRTA on that, because buses are going to be coming in there. It would certainly add traffic to that area, but I'm not sure what their plans are. Their plans could involve coming through the main gate of DPW to access this lot, or like I said, it does have frontage on that entrance to the Harmon Industrial Park.
But Mr. Borja, when you were part of the Committee on Land, did you consider this proposal?
Yes, but at that time, the information that was provided to us, it wasn't a map, and we actually held back the bill because the site plan that was being given to us was basically an aerial photograph. Somebody circled the area and wrote down 6,120 square meters, so it wasn't a formal map. And, I believe that would probably be the fault of mass transit at that time. They didn't provide the proper information to develop it into a bill to be able to effectuate transfer. Yeah. But yes, this endeavor has been going on for maybe 3 years, at least 3 years that I know of.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Joe. At this time, ladies and gentlemen, we have only like 10 minutes, so let me just end it by saying this. Bill number 4235 COR, as amended and further amended by the Committee on Public Safety, Board of Safety, Military and Veterans Affairs, Mayor's Council of Guam Infrastructures and Infrastructure and Public Transit, and Act to grant administrative jurisdiction of 2 acres, 6,120 square meter portion of partial 5109, R2 lot 5109, REM, Municipality of Tamuning, to the Guam Regional Transit Authority is adjourned. Thank you very much.